समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
आप समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
What will be Donald Trump's next move? Will he go for Greenland? Will he intervene in Iran? Or will he take military action on the soil of Mexico? With Donald Trump, anything is possible. And public intellectuals, renowned public intellectuals, voices from the United States of America are now urging the world to not pander to what can only be called Trump's bullying. Prominent among them has been renowned economist Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Professor Sachs has been pointing out America's policy of regime change, pointing to 100 such governments toppled in the last few decades. He's now urging India to look at what is happening between India and America somewhat differently. In fact, he is saying that India should pay more attention to its relations with China than it should, at least at this moment in history, to mending and improving its relations with Washington. Professor Sachs is in India right now, and I want to welcome him to our program. Thank you so much for making the time. You are today one of the most followed voices in the world, and certainly here in India, and I really appreciate your time. I want to start by asking you how you look at what's happening between India and the United States of America. Just in the last 24 hours, we've had a high-ranking official in the Trump administration claim that because Prime Minister Modi did not make a personal phone call to President Trump, the trade deal between the two countries has not been completed. Now, it's extraordinary to hear that everything simply boils down, evidently, to the bruised ego of the American president.
It is extraordinary to hear that story. It is bizarre, but I have to say we're living in bizarre times. As a general matter, I have been saying to Indian friends for many years, the United States is politically wounded, unstable, and it is not India's ally or partner. I'm not saying that India should have an offensive against the United States, but I am also saying that the idea that this is a close alliance that is the key for India is also mistaken. Frankly, I never thought that an American president would be so absurd and unstable and dangerous as Trump. So even as I was making those warnings in recent years, I wasn't anticipating the madhouse that we're seeing right now. But this kind of extreme narcissism and personalism of a US president taken together with a political system which is, I call it extra constitutional. It is no longer bound by the Constitution, by the Congress holding the executive in check according to the terms of the Constitution, makes everything all the more dangerous. Really, it depends on the prime minister calling the president to flatter him and stoke his ego. And actually, that's exactly what Lutnick said. The Secretary of Commerce said, this is all about Trump. It's extraordinary. Well, I think the world has to explain to the grown-ups that remain in the United States, the world cannot operate on the basis of a mad emperor. So the United States has to get back into normal behavior. I don't know if Mr. Lutnick is capable of that, of advising his own president. But the fact of the matter is the world cannot hang on the balance of the whims and the ego and the flattery of an unstable near octogenarian. That's what we have right now in the United States.
Professor Sachs, I'm sure you've picked up two kinds of opinion while you're here in India. There is one school of thought that echoes what you're saying, and another that agrees with what you've said, but believes that the stakes are very high for India, both in terms of the impact of the tariffs. There is now a 500% tariff threat looming large if that legislation goes through, and also security challenges because of our neighborhood, because of the turbulence in Asia. We have Pakistan and Bangladesh, where there are problems from a security perspective. And you have, of course, China, which remains a very complex relationship for Delhi. My question to you is, to those who say to you, and I'm sure you've had those voices, Trump is nuts, but we've just got to tolerate 2 more years of this. And so we shouldn't be drawn into a sort of gear shift with Washington. What would you say?
First, in terms of the instability of the neighborhood, the United States has caused a lot of it. This is part of the problem. You look at Pakistan. The U.S. has inflamed the situation with Pakistan, not China, but the United States. The U.S. acted to bring down Imran Khan. It decided one day, because Imran Khan said things that were too nice about Russia and China, this man has to go. They went back to the Pakistani military and to the politicians beholden to it. And within a month, he was voted out of office and then put in jail, actually, on extraordinarily trumped up charges. Then you look at Bangladesh and its color revolution. There's a lot of meddling going on. So the idea that the United States is the safety zone in this context, I think, probably puts things upside down. We don't know all the story. That's how covert operations by the United States work. But there are a lot of telltale signs of a lot of unpleasantness. The fact that the Pakistani military is dining in Washington is another sign that India has to think very carefully, not thinking that it's going to run into America's embrace as the source of safety. My view is that the BRICS are key. India-China bilateral relations, that's a long, complicated, and sometimes very painful story. I believe that that story should be resolved. But I think the best way for India to resolve it is in the context of the BRICS. The BRICS are the major countries of the world, period, but they're also the major countries of the world outside of the U.S. alliance. And if they stand together for the principles of the UN Charter, international law, staying in treaties, being responsible, that is extraordinarily powerful. It's safety for India. It's a natural kind of leadership for India. It is a way to security for India. And that is how I would basically recommend things. I do believe, I have to say, that India and China can and should resolve the bilateral issues. I believe that the common aims of India and China to have a peaceful, multipolar world in which those countries, your country and China, are not bullied or attempted to be bullied by the United States is a strong common interest. Now that the United States is ripping up the UN Charter, there's an even stronger common interest that the other 192 member states of the UN say, no, you can't rip up the UN Charter. This is what's keeping us safe. This is what is allowing us to address global issues. I say to my friends in China all the time, champion India's membership in the UN Security Council as the sixth permanent member. We need India, which is a great power, which is the world's most populous country, which is the world's fastest growing major economy. We need India as a permanent member of the Security Council. I want China to make that gesture because I want to resolve the bilateral challenges also so that we really move to a multipolar world. And the U.S. finally gets the message. You're 4% of the world population. You can thrive, you can use your successes, but you're 4% of the world population, and you can't dictate to the rest of the 96%.
I'll get to India and China and the BRICS in just a moment, but you mentioned the role of the United States in ousting leaders, bringing down governments through covert and sometimes even overt operations. Venezuela, for example, is overt, not covert. You mentioned Pakistan and Bangladesh in that context, but you have actually documented how this has long been the policy of the United States of America. Perhaps with Trump, the difference is that he's literally rubbing the world's nose in the mud while he's doing it. Talk a little bit about the US regime change and what's changed under Trump.
First, the United States learned what it knows from the British. So we have to understand that. The British Empire was an empire of regime change. It would move borders, it would cheat, it would lie about borders, it would divide and conquer. It ruled the world in this way, including the Indian subcontinent, for about 150 years. And the United States learned from Britain. By the way, the British, or I get messages from Britain saying, please don't say British, it's the English. So I just want to put that footnote that I don't want to blame the Welsh and the Scots the same way necessarily. But take 1953. This was a kind of handoff from the British Empire to the American Empire in Iran in 1953, when MI6 and the CIA overthrew Mossadegh, the democratic prime minister of Iran, because Mossadegh dared to say that the oil in Iran was actually Iranian, not British or American. So this is not a figure of speech or a cartoon. It's an actual playbook of how empire works in the last 2 centuries, I'd say the Anglo-American empire. The CIA was founded in 1947, and essentially from that date, the CIA has been the covert arm of overthrowing other governments. There are many playbooks for this, or there's a playbook with many different options. It can be direct coups, it can be kidnapping a president like the United States did last week. That is not unique. Manuel Noriega of Panama was kidnapped the same way. The president of Haiti in 2004 was taken to an unmarked CIA plane and flown to the Central African Republic from his residence one morning in a Haiti coup. It can be assassinations like Diem of Vietnam in 1963, or Patrice Lumumba in the beginning of Congo's independence. There are many assassinations. It can be color revolutions, meaning that the U.S. uses its now social media or mass media or so-called NGO presence, which it funds very amply through the National Endowment for Democracy, to get people out on the streets. When the government cracks down, then it intervenes one way or another with economic sanctions or with the CIA operations, or the unrest topples the government internally. I think what's happening in Iran right now is this kind of operation. Iranians are out on the streets because their economy is in a tailspin. But if you look at what Trump is doing, what's called maximal pressure, since he came into office, he's trying to bring the Iranian government down, including, of course, bombing it and giving a green light to Israel to use whatever means Israel wants to use to bring the Iranian government down. And a former CIA director, Mike Pompeo, on his New Year's posting, social media posting, said something to the effect that I welcome all those Mossad agents out on the streets of Tehran right now, stoking unrest. This is outrageous. This is how it's done. This is what happened in Ukraine in the end of 2013 and early 2014. The U.S. turned on its machine to bring out mass protests. I know some of how that was directly funded, because people bragged to me about the U.S. funding of the protests in the Maidan. And then we know from intercepted messages of U.S. officials in early January 2014, they were already plotting who would lead the next government. So we can't take events at face value in a world of this kind of U.S. covert action. We have to understand these events for what they are. The U.S. has military bases and CIA stations in about 80 countries in the world. It's estimated to be 750 to 800 overseas military bases. It's unique in world history, that kind of reach. The only one that came close to it was the British Empire, but the U.S. has far exceeded the British Empire in this regard. And that gives the U.S. a hand in the internal politics of many, many countries. Not India. India's way out of the reach of the United States, not China. But the United States tried it in Russia, and President Putin put it down. And frankly, I would advise governments anywhere in the world, don't let the National Endowment for Democracy in. That is a steering wheel for the United States. That is the way that the United States insinuates itself into your local politics. It's the opposite of sovereignty. It's the opposite of democracy. It is a kind of Orwellian name for an institution whose purpose is U.S. foreign policy, not the democracy of the country in question.
To those who would say that what's happening in Iran is actually the uprising, spontaneous uprising of a brave people against an oppressive regime, you are arguing that that is too simplistic a narrative?
Absolutely. What it is an uprising of a desperate people that are seeing their currency collapse, their living standards collapse, their livelihoods collapse, their means to get health care collapse. All of that is happening, and the pain is real. But where does it come from? From the United States deliberately, absolutely, overtly trying to crush the Iranian economy. And it's been doing that for years. The same thing happened in Venezuela. When Trump came into office in 2017, he put on comprehensive sanctions to kill the Venezuelan oil industry, PDVSA. And between 2016 and 2020, the physical oil production in Venezuela fell by 75%. There were no spare parts. There was no financing. There was no possibility of repairs. The GDP of the country fell by 62% in per person terms, according to the IMF data. Then people revolt. And the United States says, oh, you see, people hate this regime. Well, they do. They have a collapsed living standard. That's the playbook.
And you say that United States of America has done this 100 times. If you look at regime change ops over the last few decades, where do you think Trump will intervene next?
Just let me say, just to clarify one point, it's not actually 100 times bringing down a government. It's 100 times trying to bring down a government. Many of these times it fails. But I recommend the book by Lindsay O'Rourke called Covert Regime Change, written in 2018, where she documents 70 cases of regime change operations just between 1947 and 1989. She took the Cold War because a lot of declassification had occurred. Since then, I suppose that one could argue of probably at least another 30 such operations all over the world, in Latin America, in the Middle East, in South Asia, in East Asia, and in the Caribbean and elsewhere. So nobody has a comprehensive list because this is deniability, and the United States' whole basis of the CIA is complete unaccountability. Nobody looks at this, not the Congress, not the public, not the historians, because this is the secrecy of a regime in which almost everything is, quote, classified information. But you can count, and I've seen a number of them with my own eyes. I've had President of Haiti tell me they're going to take me out. And boy, they took him out, put him on an airplane. 23 hours later, he was in the Central African republic. I've had people bragging to me, as I explained, about how they financed the protests and the unrest in Ukraine. Where is Trump likely to go next? Well, he has given us the list recently. Greenland is high on the list. I think it's real. Whether it's not really a military operation, if the United States claims it, puts in a few more troops, and declares it is U.S. territory, Europe is not going to go to war over that. The question is, will Trump do that? My guess is that Trump will do that. What will be interesting is, will Europe bow down and say, yes, Emperor, we agree, or will it actually say, this is not right? We don't know, because Europe considers itself completely dependent on the United States because of Russophobia. They're so terrified of Russia, they've exposed themselves to every abuse by the United States. This is crazy. I've been telling them that for many, many years. Go talk to the Russians. They're not the source of your problem. But the Europeans have disagreed with me all along. So we're about to find out on that score. Of course, Iran is right in the bullseye right now. Why? Because Israel which is the other rogue country in this world, in my view, totally paired with the United States in these actions, has been since 1996 determined to overthrow the Iranian government. It's not so easy because Iran is 10 times larger than Israel. Iran is not a pushover. Of course, people in India will understand that Persia's been there a very, very long time. It's not going away because Donald Trump or Benjamin Netanyahu say so, but they're going to try again. And I believe what's happening out on the streets in Tehran is part of this playbook. Don't get me wrong, the pain is real, the unhappiness is real, but it's contrived. Iran could be a prosperous country were the United States not trying to crush the economy. And all one has to do is look at the U.S. sanctions, the seizure of Iranian assets, the charges that are made, the confiscation of Iranian property, the blockage of Iranian exports, to understand what's happening right now. So I think that that's the next target. I'm extremely worried about it because, unlike Venezuela, Iran is at the center of great power politics. Iran brings in India's interests, it brings in Pakistan's interests, it brings in Russia's interests, it brings in China's interests. It's a cauldron, and they are playing with fire. And these are not intelligent people, I'm sorry to say. And the CIA operations do not work. That's the other lesson of these regime change operations. You can overthrow a government, but you can't remake another country's politics. So typically, if the operation succeeds, what follows is not stability, but instability, a continuation of violence, sometimes civil war, such as in Sudan, another case of a country that was deliberately broken by a U.S.-Israeli operation to divide that country. In that case, they got two civil wars, one in the original country in Sudan and the other in the new country, South Sudan. So that's really hitting the jackpot. But that was another deliberate operation because Israel said Sudan is supporting Islamist terrorists in their view, people who were supporting the Palestinian cause, so it had to be broken. And it was broken, but you don't get peace out of that, you get chaos out of that.
You have described Donald Trump to be psychologically unstable. There are others who believe that he deliberately plays to a sort of caricatured version of himself, and there is a method to his madness. What do you believe is Trump's end goal? If you look at American law, he can only be there for another two years. Do you believe that the country has changed? sort of irrevocably after the Trump tenure, and it is going to be difficult for India to negotiate with a post-Trump America as well. What is Trump's end goal? What is Trump trying to do here?
I do believe that Trump's characteristic is not just showmanship, but impulsivity and a megalomania. I don't think this is all posturing. If it is, he's the greatest actor in the world. And I don't think so from what we know. I think he is an extraordinarily short-term person with a very short attention span. And the basic idea is, to my mind, we behave well because we want to maintain a reputation that we're trustworthy, that we're responsible people, that we can enter into cooperative relations with others. Trump does not have that future orientation, in my view. Trump's orientation is maximize whatever can be extracted at every moment. And that leads to a collapse of any kind of trust, and it leads to the potential of an escalation of conflict and disaster. And I think that that is Trump's real characteristic. I mean, how else could one explain the punitive sanctions on India other than an extraordinary short-term uh, uh, mental model? The damage that has been done is absolutely real. Indians are waking up for the first time to saying, whoa, this is weird. This is not trustworthy. This is something we have to reconsider. But it's precisely Trump's characteristic that he doesn't think about that part. He wants to do something right now with India, whether it's to stop India from buying Russian oil or make concessions in some other way or go along with some military arrangement or whatever it is. And that, I think, is why I say that this is not psychologically normal. It's not tactical. And it's certainly not beneficial for U.S. security or for the world. At the same time, I've been very unhappy with every modern American presidency. So this is not something particular to Trump, although he's really extraordinary. But Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, think of Obama, very nice person, very smart. But he put the CIA into overthrowing Assad in Syria. He launched the attack of NATO on Muammar Gaddafi. He oversaw the overthrow or the U.S. role in the overthrow of Viktor Yanukovych in Ukraine in February 2014. So there's a nice man, and he is a nice man, presiding over the similar kinds of operations because we have a deep state, we have a CIA that is the real instrument of long-term strategy. And these are long-term playbooks. And part of the long-term playbook, for example, is that the great threat to America is China, and India should be on our side. And so that's the Quad idea, which I find absurd from India's point of view. India is too great a country to be in the U.S. playbook. India needs its own playbook, and it should not be overt hostility in an alliance against a giant neighbor. It should be using the BRICS to solve the bilateral problems in a multilateral framework, not games by the United States. So I think that we have a structural issue here, which is very deep. We have a particular issue here with Trump, but things are not going to go back to, quote, normal, because normal wasn't very good. Our political system is broken in many ways. The inequalities in America are huge and rising still. The corruption of our political system is enormous because it's a pay-to-play political system. And the secret state has been there since 1947, but getting worse, not getting better.
I was going to ask in the end about the Quad, so let's end with that question. The Quad, I think Trump, in his first tenure, would have liked it to be a military alliance. India does not do alliances. But over time, through the Biden years and now Trump's second term, the Quad is seen to be a sort of countervailing force to China without being an alliance. You are arguing that India should not be in the Quad, is from what I understand.
Yes.
So let my last question be on India and China. To those in India who would say there is a border conflict or a disagreement at the very least with China, there is a sense that China is a patron of an adversarial nation like Pakistan, that China is also invested in some of the other immediate countries in our neighborhood, and therefore India can't trust China. So how do we mend relations with China? You would say what? And do you actually think India should walk out of the Quad?
I do think India should not be part of the Quad because India should not be part of a group that is explicitly and overtly anti-China. India should be finding ways to address the challenges of China. If you actually go back to the border disputes, which are serious, of course, because they've led to war, they originate in lines drawn on maps by the British, such as the McMahon Line drawn in 1914. The British left lots of mischief in this world. This should be what two absolutely great countries and civilizations and superpowers overcome is Mr. McMahon, who was a middle-level military official in 1914 with a long story, but not one that should be determining the fate of the relations between the two greatest nations in the world in the 21st century that constitute almost 40% of humanity. I want China to support India in the UN Security Council. For me, that's a litmus test also. I want to say to China, as I do all the time, your interest is a strong India. It is not India as a foe, but India as a strong, developed partner and a trading partner and a technology partner and a security partner in the context of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and so on. So I would like both countries to put aside the hostilities and the idea that there is an irreparable harm to go back to the origins, which is Britain, in fact, and the U.S. continues to try the same playbook, and to say we can do better than this. I regard the BRICS as a real opportunity. I very much like the BRICS because the BRICS are saying to the Western world, your Western-led imperialism is over. We are half the world population, and with the partners more than that. And we want a multilateral world. And no, Mr. Miller, the deputy chief of staff of Mr. Trump, you are wrong. The world is not run by power or by power alone. The world is run by principle, and we stand for principles. So to my mind, when I'm asked every day, will this mean, Trump's behavior mean that Russia will grab what it wants and China will grab what it wants? I hope the answer is exactly the opposite, that the other superpowers of the world say this is not the world we want and it's not the world we're going to make, and that the BRICS puts forward positive solutions. One of them, by the way, that I would really urge, I would like a very large UN campus in India and a very large UN campus in China. One of the reasons is the United States may well announce one day we're out of the UN. Just this week, the United States walked out of 31 UN organizations. The US has gone out of its way in the last 2 weeks to ridicule the United Nations. I don't know whether the US will stay in the UN, even though it was a brainchild of the United States. But I would like India and China to say, no, This is real. This is 96% of us in the world believe in the UN Charter, and we're going to have a major presence of the UN in our two countries as well, because this is a global institution, not just an institution on the east side of New York City. So this, I think, is also part of what I would do. Find the positive agenda, really press for UN Security Council membership. I'm going to do my bit also, but resolve these old issues in an amicable way, because the real issues that China and India face of economy, of trade, of technology, of safety, of climate change are huge common interests. And the United States should not be allowed to continue the divide and conquer strategy.
Well, this has been riveting, Professor Sachs. I can only thank you as an Indian for your plain speak. I hope you have a great visit and stay here. I know all the journalists are sort of after your time, but I hope you get some downtime as well. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Great
Bye-bye.
to be with you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.